Hey, what's up, people? So in this video, I'm going to show you this super cool pattern in Orchestra, which is leveraging a metadata framework to drive some of your data ingestion. So at a high level, a metadata framework is how you can really scale ingestion on a massive scale. So let's say you have a bunch of sources like Salesforce or Postgres and a bunch of different objects inside them. So these would probably be things like tables, sources of data. So customers' accounts, maybe you've got some entities in a database for things like plants or shipments. And essentially the idea here is to pass this as a configuration in the orchestrator through to a component that knows how to process this data. And it means that it's very easy, right? If you have a new set of say there's a new table you need to do, as long as your metadata store is version controlled, it's very easy to add. All you would need to do is run this, ideally in code. And now this can get ingested automatically. So super simple. Cool. So that's what we have in Snowflake. Now we can come to Orchestra and we can get that data and pass it through to another task. So here, I'm just going to run this SQL query, which is selecting those values from the metadata table and specify the database and the schema. And what we're going to do is we're going to store the outputs so that these can be used in a downstream task. Then, in this case, we're going to call Azure Data Factory. So what you'd probably have is something like a copy activity in a pipeline in ADF, and I'll show you that in a sec. But basically, all we're doing is passing a parameter that's called data, and then Orchestra is going to return an array, which can be accessed on the previous task with this syntax. So outputs and then square brackets results. If you need to fetch that in an easy to use way, you can do that here. So I've just copied that to the clipboard, and now if I need to access it again, you just need to put the output name. Some more detail on how we do the outputs is in the docs. So pretty straightforward. And then I can kind of show you what it looks like in ADF. So in this case, it's very simple. We have this parameter that we've defined called data, which matches this value. And then we have a for each. In order to get the for each, you have to use this syntax. So ADF is a bit tricky when it comes to passing arrays. Like, you should really just be able to do that, but you basically have to stringify it and then JSONify it, which is not the best, but it works. And then within that, you can have your copy activity. Now, it doesn't have to be a copy activity. You could maybe have a notebook that imports different packages from like a repo, right? But a copy activity is definitely one of the most common things we see. For illustrative purposes, I've just added a web activity here, but you can kind of see what's happening. So to access the item in the body, you just use, again, this dynamic syntax, which is @item. And then we can kind of see what happens when we run this. So if I go to monitor, I can see what's happened here. And we can see I've got that's the wrong one. We can see I've got a bunch of different activities. So the for each has got 9 items in it, reflecting the 9 different rows. And then the web activity has got each item in the array. So Salesforce customers. So this is now accessible to like what would be the copy activity, and then you'll be able to sort of push this through, which is really cool. And then in Orchestra, when we run this, you'll see we've done the fetch metadata task. And we've got these outputs that have been set by the task. These have then been put into the pipeline run at runtime. And if we expand out the lineage, we can see we have the query that we've done in Snowflake, which is selecting the metadata. We have the for each. And then we have all of the web activities. So yeah, super powerful pattern. In the future, we're going to add like matrix applications here. So let's say you didn't want to run a data factory pipeline. Let's say you had all of the data in a sort of Python task, or rather like you had a Python task that could take in like any source or object and then know how to move that data. If that notebook was called like ingest, then what you would do is add in the inputs as environment variables, and we'll have matrix syntax. So you can basically spawn multiple instances of the same thing without having to leverage a for each in Data Factory. But yeah, super powerful, very easy to configure. Yeah, hopefully helpful for folks that are doing this already on Azure and beyond.